Welcome to another This Week in Co-working discussion.
Welcome back to the This Week in Co-working podcast feed. I am your host, Hector Kolonas. Today, I am joined by a fantastic guest co-host who is no stranger to the podcast. We're joined by Ben Wright. Ben, how are you today?
Great, Hector. Good to be here.
I know last time you were here, you were wearing a slightly different hat. You are now part of a new enterprise or helping an enterprise launch and grow into the US. What is your current role at the company?
Yeah. So, I spent 8 years in the demand side of flexible workspace, working for marketplaces, brokers, and then the largest operator in the world. What I really endeavored to do with kind of my next move was how can I help solve some of the really big systemic problems of the industry? And one of them, candidly, is profitability. I couldn't ignore something that has the potential to both raise revenue and cut cost at the same time, because that gives a solution to one of the biggest problems in the industry, which is candidly, repeatable profitability that doesn't require operators to be a hero. And so I am the managing partner of Koho, which is a AI revenue operations solution. And we'll talk probably about what that means a little bit more. Based in the UK, my job is to help really roll that solution out in the US.
That's amazing, and congrats. I believe this announcement was only a week or so ago. So congratulations on the new role. I'm excited to see you stepping into that. I know we've had many conversations offline around what does it look like for profitability? What is the data side? What does all of that look like? But before we get into that and what is in this week's newsletter, just a quick teaser for folks listening in. Today we're going to dig into some numbers coming out around the live, work, play approach in our industry and how that's growing. We're going to explore where are we in the AI product lifecycle right now when it comes to kind of co-working and other technology. And we're going to explore a little bit about whether pods, if you've got a lot of pods in your space, whether that is a failure to design a good space. So before we dive into that, let's dig a little bit more into what Koho is. Give me the elevator pitch of we step into the elevator, we press the top floor. What does Koho do for my co-working space?
So the best operators, the ones that are making money, all are just basically they have great process, they have great people, they've got really hands-on leaders that make the business happen. What I've learned over the years is that almost all the variability in the business is in the revenue side, meaning how many new customers are we getting? Are they the right folks for our available inventory? Are we pricing things the right way? Are we renewing things the right way? Nothing about that is sexy, but what I found is that expertise separates the best operators from the folks that can't make money in the industry. I'm happy to say that the majority of co-working operators and flexible workspace operators are profitable today, but it's too close to 50% for what I would like. So what Koho does is it takes really phenomenal data that is owned by the customer and assembled in an MCP, which is essentially the type of data that can be read by LLMs, pulls it from all the systems together, applies best in class processes, and the processes could be unique and are unique to each operator, but then enables agentic solutions to work those processes and either do things after hours, do the menial tasks a little bit better and more reliably, leaving the things to staff that probably move the needle more, but stitches all that together in a way that the data is really still owned by the operator. And that's a really important distinction here. So excited to talk more about that. But that's what revenue operations is in the age of AI. And that's what Koho is.
I love that. And I'm going to disagree with you because revenue optimization and RevOps is really sexy right now. So anyone who disagrees with that, fight me about it. So tell me a little bit more about the actual platform. Obviously, you've mentioned AI, you've mentioned MCPs, you've mentioned all what people will call the industry buzzwords of a tech company right now. But Koho isn't something that was built last week. Koho has been around for a little bit of time now. Can you tell us a little bit more about the founders, the story, where Koho came from, and why you were so interested in joining their mission?
Yeah. So KK, the CEO, basically is somebody that came from the SaaS software industry, working for the biggest SaaS software companies in the world, helping them optimize revenue and largely around meeting sales goals using CRM systems and so on and so forth. What she brought to the industry starting a couple of years ago was just real knowledge and discipline about how you manage a fixed inventory business, meaning if an office goes empty in this month, you can't make up for it next month because you have a fixed set of inventory. So bringing just best practices, and it was those best practices that were built over the last 2 years, but into now a really modern data model. And so what the company has done and been really smart to do is take that data model, take all the integrations that it's built specific to the flexible workspace industry in the UK, and turn them into the foundation for the next generation of agentic solutions. So by building an industry standard MCP, for which we can talk about more about what that is, because that is a super buzzy term. It allows co-working operators to use Claude if they want to. Right now, a lot of operators, the really early adopters, are pointing LLMs at their systems, and sometimes those LLMs are giving them really useful outcomes. Other times it's hallucinations because they can't quite read the data or they can't quite get access to it all. Basically, this gives really agentic solutions access to a very standard but very rich data set that brings your CRM together with your property management software, even with your occupancy and Wi-Fi data, to really understand what's really happening, who's really in my space, what are they paying, when is their break date in their contract, who's the right person to talk to, are they happy with the space. And what's been really cool, Hector, is more I've gotten into this, because as you know, my background is not operations, it's more the revenue side. We're enabling the automation of the types of processes that the best operators do, but also that wear them out at the same point. And so many of them know exactly how to do it. It can be so time intensive that they don't always do it, or they can't pass it to every level of their organization. But now automation really lets them do that. And so maybe the better word rather than AI is we can just talk about automated revenue operations in a way that honestly I think is going to change the industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. And something that we've discussed a bunch of times is natural language processing, being able to ask a human language question and get back a specific result is where LLMs has trained us to expect that. Putting an MCP kind of controls how this natural language interacts with the databases without it making mistakes like, wiping your HubSpot or updating everybody's invoices to zero, right? Things that I've seen happen or have heard about happening, not at any of our clients at Synchro, thankfully. We've put in pretty good protections against that, but we have heard of horror stories. So it's great to see you guys playing into that and bringing best practices to make sure that you can speak to your data essentially and speak to your revenue optimization and operations and still protect that data in a way that you can have trust and avoid a little bit of that hallucination that you mentioned a little bit earlier. So one last point I want to ask you about this before we dive into this week's news is give me a good use case or an example. I know in the newsletter we mentioned this week that some operators have even seen 15% of revenue growth. What does that look like? Give me an example so people can kind of really sink their teeth into how someone would use Koho over a 6-month or a year period.
Yeah, I'll give you two that are both on the top line revenue growth. So a lot of operators are using agentic solutions like Unity to qualify leads. So taking after hours leads, taking smaller leads, and then qualifying them enough to hand them to a human salesperson. A lot of operators are seeing real returns from that. By connecting, tools like Unity to higher quality data sets, you can actually take the entire booking. You can take their payment. You can basically take a small lead all the way through the process as opposed to just handing it to a salesperson. So that's that's still a small percentage of revenue, but the really big one is how you take data from a CRM, data from your inventory and your contracts, and overlay them with the really robust processes that you have to really do renewals the right way. Operators that do renewals well have to kind of cobble together information, all of that information, mostly manually, into a conversation between usually a senior person at the operator with the on-site person, should they have more than one location. And it's a really time consuming, and they've got to do it at the right time and with the right information to give enough lead time to make the renewal happen. Koho has automated all of that to where literally the platform will suggest, hey, it's 2 months from company X's renewal, their price is this, their happiness with the space is this, they're coming in this often, here they're paying this right now, would suggest based on your occupancy and based on your pricing that you charge them this, and we've prepared the contract for you to present. That is a different game, and we think that's the biggest revenue uplift that we think we're going to be able to find, and that's the majority of the 15% growth that we're going to see. It's a true game changer.
That is fascinating. And I could absolutely geek out with you all day about just how Koho works, what it can do, what it could do in the future. But let's dive into this week's newsletter.
Let's do it.
Starting over at the data section, we saw some really interesting, a slightly different data set out of Co-working Cafe this week, looking at one particular sector that we have definitely covered on the podcast and in the newsletter before. And it's this idea of live, work, play developments. So mixed use properties, mostly mixing residential, retail, and office into one ecosystem to create a more investable and protectable building asset. The team at Yardi/Co-working Cafe actually looked at what does this look like in the US market over the last 10 years. They saw that 542 developments that had at least a bit of each of these three elements were completed between 2016 and 2025. That covers 129 million square feet. So quite a substantial size of developments, with 67 of these developments actually being completed in 2025 alone. Another interesting number that I took away from this was that on average, 62% of the square footage is allocated to multifamily residential, with 27% being left to office, and then retail taking up the ground for the 11% of these developments. You're probably wondering, what has this got to do with co-working? Well, they looked into that as well. So the number of co-working spaces located within these developments in the top 10 cities rose from 35 in 2022 to 56 in 2026. So we're seeing a 60% increase in the number of these products and projects, including co-working, into that mix of mixed-use developments. I've been following this for quite a while. Ben, what do you think? Is this something that you've been tracking at all? Has it been on your radar?
Not only has it been on my radar, it's in my day to day. So when I was at the Instant Group, I wasn't supposed to have any favorite operators because I serve thousands and thousands of them globally. But there was one that I used more frequently than any other one. In Colorado, I'm a member of Lifetime Fitness. And Lifetime Fitness has the most basic co-working setup. They call it, at that location, it's called Lifetime Work, but it's almost like a cafe style. But what's amazing is I could go get a workout in. I could take a call before the workout. I could take the call after the workout, and be on screen, and with modern technology, it wasn't disruptive to anybody. I didn't have to pay anything extra for that. It was where I am. And so, for example, the retail, I think that the retail locations, I think, are a great, that's real similar in the sense that, hey, I want a co-working location that provides an extra level of service or causes people to linger in my retail development. Same concept. Multifamily, I think, is a little bit in reverse. It's like, well, I'm there, I live there, but it creates, usually on a mezzanine or a second floor location, it creates a little bit more community. It creates a little more stickiness for an otherwise single use development. So that's not surprising at all.
It's a very interesting strategy about creating an ecosystem of workplaces that fit into people's lives as opposed to trying getting them to go to a specific office. I think that is the big shift we're tracking here. Residential and building developers are taking note with that 60% increase in including co-working into these mixed use developments. Hat tip to the team at Silverman here in Jersey City. They have really nailed this model with their own co-working brand. It sits in the middle or kind of in the first floor normally of their developments. Ground floor, always retail, always something that creates value in the community. Pet grooming, hair salons, things that people come to for a while. One of their buildings has a school in or a kindergarten and an elementary school. Right above that and adjacent to that is the co-working space. So very often when I do drop-offs and I have an early call or I need to be there earlier in the day, I will hop into a co-working space if I happen to be going towards that school, and above that floors of residential. So a really good ecosystem play that I've seen here, at least in Jersey City, but they're not alone if we're seeing 500 plus of these projects over the last decade, and we're going to see a whole bunch more. I think they were saying that there is something like a 94 developments of this kind in the pipeline to be completed within 2026 and 2029. So absolutely a trend that we're seeing, and as we've discussed, understandable why we're seeing this trend in particular. Now,
there's a lot of talk about the loneliness epidemic, and work from home can exacerbate that a little bit. Working in these kinds of environments, gyms, retail, multifamily, I think can actually be an antidote to that, right? You can catch a quick call when you're, at the gym or at your favorite shop, right? So I think there's a temptation to think, oh, that's not real work. I think we're just kind of getting started on work-life integration here.
Completely agree. And the way we work is changing. When, how, where from is all changing. At least I'm seeing it firsthand, but I'm seeing it with a lot of people who are not in tech related careers. So we should keep seeing this. And obviously, this is with the caveat that this is mostly knowledge workers, frontline workers, retail workers. They can't really work remotely. So I just want to caveat that we do understand that not everybody can work from a desk. So we're talking about that part of the market in particular. In the newsletter this week, we've seen 4 links talking about how AI is either changing how people are finding apartments. We're seeing 2 different platforms tease or launch built-in AI agent capabilities. Then we also saw another platform kind of really speed up how you can interact and extend or book spaces from wherever you are in the space. This is a huge trend that we've been tracking for a while. You're not the last person you're going to be hearing talk about AI in co-working. You're going to see it at all the conferences. You're going to hear it for a long time. But that brings us to an interesting point, Ben. Where are we, do you think, on the product life cycle or product journey of AI? Because we've lived through kind of mobile adoption, we lived through web adoption, we've lived through app adoption after that. I'm definitely aging myself here. You don't look a day over 20. So what I'm asking you is, what do you think, where are we like in the AI or agentic AI journey?
I wrote a piece on the Substack that I write called I'm Flexible on how would AI change leasing and so on and so forth. And discovery, this idea which you mentioned in apartments in the newsletter, discovery is really what's going to change. And to take the fanciness out of that word, it's how do people find their next space, right? So one, people are not going to be using Google forever. The expectation is 5 to 7 years from now, agentic search will really have taken over for kind of what we think of as SEO today. Setting up constant agents that can be making suggestions for exactly the type of space wherever you are is not far off. And so that's happening in, apartments, and it's going to happen everywhere. In terms of where we are, you and I talked about this a little bit, and I think we both agree. I was early in my career when the internet was starting to be a thing, and people asked when I first started working in the internet, why would I have a website? I think we're probably past the why part when it comes to agents, right? We're now in the next part, which is, hey, I've got a website, but it's a brochure. That's all it is. I can't really change it. I can't observe how well it's working. That was to tie it to really date myself and maybe you, Hector. This goes back to like the call it the late 90s, early 2000s internet, where it was kind of like what are we even getting out of things? There was a massive crash with a lot of the big stocks in the internet back then. Some would say we're headed that way with AI now. But right now, with AI agents, you probably know why you have one. You can't observe if it's really working, not in the same way you can with a website or an application. You don't know if A is better than B, meaning and you don't have a lot of control or updating, and it doesn't really connect to your current system. So I guess where we are with AI feels like the early 2000s of the internet. Now, where did we go from there? We went with massively towards massively connected systems, a lot of automation, and I do think the revolution promised by Google, Amazon, Facebook, and others has come to pass. Like it really did, but not without fits and starts. And I think that's kind of where we are with
Yeah.
agentic solutions. Is we're going to go down some road like that. Will it take as long? Who knows? Will it be just as impactful? I would go on the record and say, yeah, and probably more impactful.
Yeah, I'm also going to caveat what I'm about to say next. This is not investment advice. Speak to your financial planner, all of that, entertainment purposes. But I keep hearing this question about, oh, is it going to be an AI bubble? And if you do look at the last big bubble that everyone is referencing, we're talking about the dot-com bubble, right? And if you really look at what came out of the dot-com bubble, the things that they were aiming to do, pets.com, we now have Chewy. Other companies that were crazy
Webvan.
ideas back then.
Webvan was the other
Webvan,
one that
there you go.
that big money, big failure.
And yet today we have platforms and systems in our daily lives that are even crazier than those ideas. And we use them every day as if that's perfectly normal because the internet has become part of how we live. And I think that goes to what you were saying. We're at that point where AI and AI agents will be part of how your parents interact with the shopping at the grocery store. I love where technology is going, but I'm like, don't just slap AI labels on everything. Now, we see that a lot in many, many industries, but we're seeing a bit in co-working right now. So I'm very, very curious to see, are people going to just start looking through that? I mean, like, okay, AI is everywhere. So what else can you do for me? What can you do for my operational team? What can you do for my janitorial team? What can you do for my actual business and revenues past the AI label? I think we're getting to that point, as you were saying, with the brochure sites, where everyone had a website. What came next is what you could actually do with that website. And that's, I think, I completely agree with you there. That's the phase we're going into now. Every co-working space will have one, if not more, agents. These agents will interact, they will pass information and packages to each other and allow things to get done. And given that I used to build websites in the brochure days, I remember that change vividly. I remember us going from building a page and then copying it and changing the text and then copying it and changing the text and then copying it and changing it and then realizing that all four versions, you didn't edit the footer, to editing four different pages. We're getting to a point where we're going to be able to build and control and customize agents the way we now edit websites, templates, shared knowledge bases, shared access, shared MCPs. So I completely agree with you that that is where we are and where we're going, and I'm absolutely excited about it. Do you think we'll talk about it at all at Juicy?
I mean, I'm sure what I hope happens is I think people are probably tired of just hearing about AI as a novelty. I think they want to hear about how they can use AI to make more money and be more profitable. But I think what I see with some of the really smart operators is how can I use AI to be smarter about my own business? So, folks like Bill Bennett, folks like Tim Slaughter, folks like Ramon from Thrive are all personally using AI to get smarter and better about their own business. And so that's gonna, I think, unlock, especially, I mean, engagement at that level, the CEO level. That's where I think we're really going to see a lot of innovation and candidly a lot of really financially relevant solutions as opposed to novelties.
All right, let's jump a little bit into a completely different topic. Let's take a step away from technology for a second and look at furniture. We had two different links about furniture in the newsletter this week. One was from OFS showing their new modular technology. I mainly shared it because I loved the way the video looked. It was just this reimagination. I've seen it in other industries before, but seeing them really portray how you could use their different modular stacks to kind of build out an office as you grow, as your customers change needs, desires, which I just thought was a really cool way to demonstrate that. But the story that definitely caught both your eye and my eye, Ben, was tongue-in-cheek post saying that pods that we see everywhere are actually a red flag or a signal that we got office design completely wrong, or we failed at office design. What say you, Ben? Is pods really a signal that our offices are poorly designed?
Well, I mean, I can speak more to co-working and flexible workspace offices than traditional offices. So what I will say is that in the 700 or so different co-working locations that I've been to personally, especially in the last few years, pods are the most heavily utilized solution in the entire place, meaning dramatically more than common areas, dramatically more than meeting rooms, even dramatically more than offices, um, right? Which is pretty crazy. So I would argue, and I don't have data to support this, but I hope I will one day, that the occupancy of pods is actually higher than anything else. And so what some operators have been doing is shrinking the size of their actually built out offices. So they end up feeling a little bit more like fixed pods that can actually be rented by the month. And per square foot, those smaller offices actually fetch a higher premium than any other thing in the space. So is it a sign of bad office design? No. I mean, I think it's a sign that fixed office design trails human behavior by more than we want it to, right? So there are a lot of really cool companies doing bookable pods, monetizable pods, pods in hotels, pods that are even meeting spaces for four. I think with the kind of aversion to capex that landlords have right now and how modular and movable pods are, I think we're in for a really, I think we're in for a pod boom if we haven't been in one already. And whether it's a sign of poor office design or not does not matter in my
This is
view.
true. The market is demanding private spaces for parts of the day. And we're definitely seeing that going back to kind of what we're saying earlier about this work ecosystem of workplaces. This also fits into it. You may want to just pop into a co-working space for a call. You don't necessarily want to sit in the open plan area to do that call. So creating this ability to kind of switch in and out of the pod into the meeting room spaces, into team spaces. We're seeing a lot of offices being bookable by the hour as well. It's another emerging trend, not only fractionally shared between two or more companies, but also just offices by the hour. Very, very popular, leaning in from kind of the therapy and coaching sides of the world, co-working for therapists, co-working for trainers, that kind of thing. We're seeing that now also adapt into traditional co-working, where folks are just like, I want an office for a couple of hours. I don't need a full-time office for a day or even a week. I just need it for a couple of hours. So I definitely just want to bring that up to say, if you have got pods, do not sleep on the fact that you could also be renting out your unused smaller offices by the hour, because there is a demand. We're seeing a growing demand for that, especially if you think about what is around your space. Are there schools? Are there places where young children have to be dropped off at random times? Are there other activities that people have to come and stay at for a couple of hours? Sports fields. This is where, the caretakers and the trailing spouses have to go and sit and do something for a while giving them a bookable space is a good revenue channel. Anything else to add on that, Ben?
Well, I think you nailed it.
Fantastic. And that kind of brings us to the end of this week's show. Ben, it is always fantastic geeking out with you. Are you going to be in New York in 2 weeks?
I will. Look forward to seeing you.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing you too. If anyone wants to catch Ben or myself, we will be at GC not this week, the next week. And so we will see you in New York. If you're not able to get to New York, reply wherever you see this, tell us where you are, and hopefully we can get out to you and meet you in person sometime soon. Ben, thanks again for being here. And until next time, take care.
Good to be here. Thanks, Hector.